Hello again. Our second segment on the cross. Can the Watchtower be trusted? This is under the head, the real agenda behind the Watchtower opposition to the cross. But what possible reason would Watchtower leaders have for resorting to such journalistically fraudulent manipulation as the above? Many of those who are most familiar with the history of the Watchtower, indeed of mind control groups generally, see the vehement opposition to the cross as another manifestation of the need of cult leaders to establish complete authority over their flocks, to isolate followers from those in the best position to threaten that authority. In the case of the Watchtower, who better to expose the poverty of their pretensions to Bible truth than the scholars of Christendom? Since the ascendancy of Judge J.F. Rutherford as Watchtower president in 1917, but especially since 1931, the Society has made a concerted effort to poison the minds of its followers against any influence from Babylon the Great, at first understood as the church nominal, that's in the Finished Mystery, but now understood to embrace all of false religion. So successful has their propaganda been that even Jehovah's Witnesses who leave the organization often assume that such claims about the pagan origin of the cross, Christmas, Easter, etc., are truths unassailable, even when the same persons have doubts about basic Watchtower teachings. Unfortunately, a not infrequent result is that they never consider going near Babylon. A connected propaganda tool reinforced by the barrage of anti-Christendom flack is the question asked of every JW who expresses any kind of doubt. After all, where would you go if you left the organization? Who else has sayings of everlasting life? Thus, multiple thousands are out there doubting the tower, but immobilized by hesitation about joining Babylon the Great. Now, under the head, is the cross a pagan symbol adopted by the church? The potency of Watchtower propaganda came home to me with newly personal meaning shortly after I ceased attending JW meetings in 1986. I had decided to investigate Watchtower teachings and history closely and was reading widely outside the Society's publications already. The difference now, though, was that whereas before I had read outside materials to disprove other religions from their own tools, by now I had enough doubts that I was reading for the first time with a relatively open mind. One day I happened across a passage on Ezekiel 9 in Jack Finnegan's The Archaeology of the New Testament. Now, Finnegan was a name I knew from Society's publications. He was usually cited as an authority to back up Watchtower claims as to the reliability of Scripture. But in Finnegan, I ran across an interesting fact I didn't recall from the Society's most recent commentary on Ezekiel. The nation shall know that I am Jehovah. How? ? From 1971, the year, by the way, I was baptized. Finnegan pointed out, quote, in Ezekiel 9:4, the man clothed in linen is instructed to go through the city of Jerusalem and put a mark, a tau, upon the foreheads of the men who sigh and groan over the abominations that are committed in the city. In Hebrew, then, the word tau both signified a mark and was also the name of the last letter of the alphabet, a letter which in the Old Hebrew script was still written in the elemental form of a cross, down at least to the eve of the New Testament period, or even into that period. According to Jack Finnegan, this is Archaeology of the New Testament, pages 224 and 223. Now, when he says cross, of course, he's talking about something like this originally, an X mark to us. And we'll get into how that symbol changed, morphed over the centuries towards the New Testament period. Now, what I discovered in Finnegan really bothered me in two different ways. Why hadn't the Watchtower mentioned this before? Was the first thing that made me uncomfortable. In their discussion of the mark, this was obviously very significant, but they had somehow glossed it over. Then, second point, what were the implications for the claimed pagan origin of the cross? I immediately took this new light to my wife Vivian, a mistake Although doing her best to be sympathetic to my need for a sabbatical, Vivian at that time was still attending the Kingdom Hall. I had resigned as an elder and was no longer going to the Kingdom Hall. She could deal with some of my reservations about Watchtower history, even some of my doubts about principal teachings, but this cross stuff was somehow just too much. I still remember vividly her emotional outburst at my revelation, and so does she. Her words were to the effect that I'd gone off the deep end, all the way into Christendom. And that, to Vivian, was a lot different than sitting home reassessing. Why the irrational reaction to a fact cited by a famous, even to JW's, archaeologist? Well, I suspect what I saw that day was what many Christians unknowingly combat when JW's call on them. While the Christian thinks he's having intellectual combat with the witness, actually what's happening is far more complex. Yes, the JW has an intellectual problem. Yes, the Christian knows he's in spiritual warfare. But the blockage is even more total, for the witness is carrying on his person all kinds of sensitivities that the average Christian can't be aware of. Among them are the sore spots opened by the counter-Christendom propaganda. You happen to wear a cross. You casually mention a birthday. You mention your favorite time of the year is Christmas, etc. So complete is the saturation effect of the Watchtower propaganda that even every charity is soiled by their association with Christendom. Back to the story. Despite Vivian, I went on researching the cross and other so-called pagan problems. Not only did the No Jehovah book not mention what the mark of salvation was, I could not remember any other reference in a publication that a modern JW might read. There is an acknowledgement that the mark was a tau, a form of the cross, an X, as I said, in a footnote of the Society's Reference Bible. But the other Watchtower magnum opus on Ezekiel, J.F. Rutherford's Vindication in 3 volumes, 1931-32, also does not admit what the mark was. In his windy 15-page discussion of the modern meaning of the vision, Rutherford, as with Fred Franz in No Jehovah, makes much of the Watchtower fulfilling Ezekiel's Watchman Commission, marking for salvation those who respond to the Watchtower's educational campaign, as the section is headed in the book. This salvation marking, say both Rutherford and Franz, is reserved for those who share in the Society's work of vindicating Jehovah. Now in the next segment we'll talk about, is God vindicated by an organization that hides the truth?